In trading, knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge in what you're doing can be costly, very costly. So you need a solid foundation of quality market education. Whether you're new to trading or a seasoned veteran looking to add advanced strategies to your arsenal, there's always something to learn and something to improve on. And now you can access the same knowledge that professional traders receive with Market Rebellion's Trading Education. I'm Bill Johnson, Head of Options Education here at Market Rebellion, and we've assembled a comprehensive curriculum based on decades of real trading experience, covering everything you need to know about trading options from beginner to advanced. We go way beyond the nuts and bolts of options theory to teach you how to apply specific trading strategies and the techniques needed to adapt your trades when markets shift. Regardless of your goals, you'll gain access to the education you need with easy-to-consume lessons so you can learn to trade with confidence, enhance your knowledge, and master the practical skills required for market success. So please join us for in-depth trading education only from Market Rebellion. Again. Today's Wednesday, and here we are again. We just told people we're going to be back on Thursday, but we have another sales webinar on Thursday, which is going to conflict with it. So here we are. But I think we'll be back on regular schedule next Thursday.
I think it's actually Thursday, isn't it, Bill? Did we miss a day? No, I'm kidding. It's what
it feels like it. After the trip from Vegas, I don't even know which day it is. But we do have a good topic for everyone. I actually wrote about this before I left for Vegas. Got a number of emails on it, got a number of comments on it after the presentation. Presentation wasn't on this, but it was kind of a part of it. And it's this whole idea of negative gamma. Now, of course, there's positive gamma, there's negative gamma, but we were just focused on the negative side. And a lot of people are saying, what in the world is negative gamma? Can you give us an example? So yes, let's go ahead and do that. Let's talk about some of the details of what it is, where it's coming from. So, where do we start? Let's start with our Chalk Talk question. Here we go, our little thought-provoking question. We will come back and review at the end. But is a debit spread, vertical spread, positive or negative gamma? That's your first question. Part B is, what about a credit spread? So what do y'all think? You buy a vertical spread, is it positive or negative gamma? Or if you sell a spread, would be a credit spread, is that positive or negative gamma? Pretty good question here, Stu. Well, we know we get this a lot in Q&A.
You know my answer, Bill. I'm not going to give it just yet.
But I know we don't want you to give it away just yet. So that's kind of where we're heading for this presentation. Again, we're going to get into the details. But quick little reminder for everyone who'd like more information about options trading and how to improve your results, please check us out, marketrebellion.com/get started. We have a tremendous amount of articles, videos, all kinds of helpful tools out there, topics just like this to help you get started. marketrebellion.com/get started. So to kick things off, let's talk about long and short options. I think that's probably a good starting point. If you are long an option, which means you bought it, you have positive gamma. It's just that simple. Now, it might not be a lot of gamma, but it's certainly not negative. So to be fair, it might be zero, but you're not going to have negative gamma. If you have short options, you're going to have negative gamma. And again, it might be zero, but it's never going to be positive. If you're at the money, or let's call it near the money, they're definitely going to be positive and negative respectively. All right, so this is where it's coming from, is simply about whether you're the owner of the option or the seller.
And just to kind of on the side note, sometimes positive or negative is sometimes referred to as long or short.
Long or short gamma, very good, yep.
I like to actually refer to it that way. It's the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, I
Long.
think that's something that a lot of floor traders use, just to say we're long gamma or short gamma.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. And that's probably easier to remember: long options, long gamma; short
Mm.
options, short gamma. And you will find out what this means in a little bit. So let's now take the next step. This is a risk graph for long shares of stock. We talked about risk graphs in so many of these. These are stock prices across the horizontal, and then our profits and losses on the vertical. So for, let's say the stock is currently at 100. We just bought the shares. This is our break even point right there at 0. Not making, not losing. All right, so right there. And if the stock is currently at 100, we can see that if the stock makes even a 1 penny move off of there, that we are technically making money. Now look what happens if we buy the $100 call, let's say for $6. There's a premium in there. And this is where a lot of people start to miss the concepts. So now you can see where this break even point is way up here. See, it's not back here at 100. Stock's currently at 100. We need the stock to be up here at 106 just to break even. So that's the strike in this example, 100 plus the $6 premium. And again, that is just to break even. So that's why I often refer to this as a speed component to an option. And that is always going to be true whenever you buy an option. And you will therefore have negative theta. So let's go back to a risk graph here for long shares of stock. Now, whenever we have the current, wherever that current stock price is, there's an imaginary bell curve that sits right over that. And all it's doing is there's a mathematical formula, I guess, or even just conceptually without even thinking about a formula of saying there's only so high or so low that a stock can move in a given amount of time or for a given volatility. And we usually measure that in volatility. For all the statisticians out there, that would be the standard deviation. But the same idea, it's just telling us the width of the curve. So in this example, we're saying somewhere down to 85 would be about the lowest of low. That's pushing 3 standard deviations. 115 would be about the high. So remember, the current stock price is right there. Now, visually, here's what you have to understand. As that stock moves, that bell curve is moving with it. Remember, it's always sitting over the current stock price. Now, if we have the 100 strike, which is that blue line, we're assuming we have the at the money option, that strike doesn't move, but the stock price could.
That
So
is a
let's
really
now,
important concept. I
oh
think
yeah,
people miss that, Bill. That the strike price is always going to be the strike price. You're not going to get
right,
some
it's
memo
fixed.
from OCC say, "Oh, we changed your strike price." Um, but the stock price will definitely move. An option will become farther in the money, less farther
Or
in the
out.
money, and
Yep,
then the money will go out of the money, and out of the money will go in the money, and back and forth. And that that's a concept that I think really gets lost a lot of the time.
oh, totally. So right now I'm saying hypothetically the stock is, let's say, at 105. If the stock moves some more, what happens? Bell curve moves right along with it. And what you have to notice is that as that bell curve moves to the right, in this example, we're getting further away from that dotted line. In other words, this call option is moving more in the money.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying, okay, now the probability for the stock to fall down to 100 is really kind of pushing that third standard deviation. It could happen, but it's not very likely. And therefore, we have a much higher probability of it expiring in the money. We've got very high deltas, low extrinsic value, all of the other stuff that comes with it.
And remember, everyone, these are probabilities. These aren't,
Oh, yeah,
uh, this is not the do all, say all, end all. These are probabilities. And even if your platform is showing, like a one delta, which is 100% probability, right? It can go lower, right? It can go back to it out of the money and be a 20
right,
delta. So it's always a snapshot in time. I like to remind people of that. It's just a
exactly. So here's,
snapshot in time at the current time, is what you're looking at.
yeah, and here's probably a better visualization of that. Let's say the stock is up here at 125. Well, according to that bell curve, now also remember, as time goes by, the bell curve is getting skinnier and taller, but we're assuming that we're keeping the time constant. But we get to a certain point where we're saying it's impossible for the stock to fall below this strike according to the bell curve. And that is super important. That's what Stu was talking about. You let one headline pop up about a terrorist attack or any number of things, unexpected inflation, and yes, you can certainly zip right past it. So these are not the same type of probabilities as, let's say, playing roulette in Vegas. Right? These are not fixed.
Yeah, right. Those probabilities are fixed. This is
Those
not.
never change. Yeah.
This is dynamic and it changes all the time and it changes with more information that comes to market. And yeah, that's the way that goes.
Yep. Now, if we just again for to continue the conversation, if we had something that gave us more uncertainty about this stock, what would happen to that bell curve? It would get shorter and wider. We would say that volatility has increased, and now maybe we could say, well, now it does have a chance of falling below 100.
Right.
So
In
as
other
Stu
words,
said, it's
like
dynamic.
the probabilities of that range are of that range are now expanding.
Expanding.
The range is expanding, so the probability is becoming greater that the stock could move into that greater range.
Yep. So again, now just visualize this. We're looking at a call option that's moving in the money. We could do the same with a put going in reverse. But imagine that as we're pushing that bell curve to the right, that those probabilities are starting to work through that curve. So for example, here's our zoomed in shot. The bell curve is now shifted a little bit to the right. And what we're doing is we're starting to fill in that bell curve. We're saying there's this much of a probability for the stock to either be to the right here in the green or to the left. So as the stock continues higher, what happens? It's moving through those zones. But notice over here on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, we are accelerating. See how that curve, like a motorcycle ramp going straight up, we are accelerating those deltas. That's going to be important in a little bit. Stock moves further to the right. Now we filled in half of the curve. What does that tell us for our delta, Stu? Roughly.
We're at 50.
We're at a delta of a half. Why? Because the stock is right there at 100. There's a 50% chance that it's going to be to the right and a 50% chance to the left. It's a 50 delta.
Yeah, there's no advantage
your options,
either side. You're right there.
Yep, and that's why your option's going to pick up 50 cents or 50% of that next move on that stock. That's important, not for every move, but for that next move. And that's because we're balancing right there at the center of that curve. But now the stock moves further to the right. What happens? We start filling in more of the curve. But notice once we've rounded this hump up here, what's happening? The green is increasing. All right, the green is we are always increasing our probabilities or increasing our deltas, but we're doing it at a slower rate because we're now on this side of the slope. So as that stock moves further to the right, what happens? Eventually, the entire curve becomes so far away from the strike. That's what we saw before, that now we're saying, okay, it's a 100% chance for this option to be in the money, statistically, and we're now saying that it has a delta of 1. All right, so if you can kind of visualize this moving through, we're accelerating the deltas here, decelerating them here, but that does not mean we're subtracting deltas. We're increasing at a decreasing rate. So what does that mean? Well, we can also look at this bell curve in a different light. We can say, let's just look at it from 0 all the way out to 100%. It's called a cumulative distribution. This is our bell curve. And all we're doing is saying, down here we've got a 0 probability or 0 deltas. Stock starts moving this way. What happens? Now we're up to 20 deltas. Stock moves up some more. Now we're up to 40 deltas. Here we're at the peak of the bell curve. See, all we're really doing is taking this part of the curve and bringing it back down for the bell curve.
Trying to do that, yeah.
Yeah, what we're doing is, again, it's called a cumulative. We're just adding up all the deltas. The stock keeps moving to the right, then we're at 80 delta, and then eventually if it goes deep enough in the money, there we are at stock price of 125, and we saw that we were virtually guaranteed to be in the money, and look at that. We're at delta 1, and we will always be delta 1. No matter how high that stock goes, you can't exceed 100% for the probabilities.
You can't exceed the movement of the stock. And keep in mind what we're talking about here, everyone. We're talking about the rate of change of the delta.
Yep.
Sometimes called the second derivative, sometimes called the delta of the delta or the change of the change. We're talking about the rate of change
Right.
of the delta, not the actual delta itself,
Right.
but the rate of change. This is
And
accelerating. This is
that's why it gets tricky.
decelerating.
Yeah. So you can see that, I mean, just visually, if you go from this point right here with a 20 delta, and we go just a little bit to the right, we made a big progress. We went to 40 delta. But you can see if I go up from here from 120, I've got maybe a 95 delta. I go up the same amount to the right. I've only picked up maybe 5 deltas or 3 deltas.
All right. So
If I
what
get
happened?
another big move out this way, I'm increasing, going from 95 to 98 or to 99, but the
Yeah.
amount that I'm adding is getting smaller.
Look what happened before, right? You went from 20 to 40. That's a
20 to
20
40, bang,
change.
big.
And before, and over on the other side, you went from 90 to 95 or 90,
Yeah, right.
5 to 98. It's less,
You're still increasing. It's just the rate
increasing at a lower rate.
at a slower rate. Okay,
Yes.
so again, I know it can be kind of confusing topics, but that's what you have to understand to get this whole idea of really what positive and negative gamma are all about. So before we take our next step, remember marketrebellion.com/get started. All kinds of great information. And believe me, you need this if you're going to make good decisions with options. And that's absolutely essential if you're going to be profitable in the long run. So let's now take a look at a vertical spread. We could really talk about lots of different strategies. We chose this one for a reason, a little bit of a surprise in a little bit, but let's look at a vertical spread. Vertical spread number one, you're going to buy the 100-105 vertical for 270. By buying this, it's a debit spread. That's what it means to buy it. We have to shell out money. We're going to be long the 100 and short the 105. Going to cost us 270. Now we're going to look at selling the 100-105 put vertical. And let's say that it's trading for 230. Now, Stu, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with these prices? Because I think some people will miss that.
So one is actually a synthetic version of the other one, right? The difference between the two strikes obviously is 5, right? 100 to 105, or you can go the other way and say 105 to 100. It's 5. So when you put them all together, the synthetic long stock on one line, the synthetic short stock on another line, the 100 and the 105, they have to be 5. They have to add up to 5.
Right.
I'm discounting any cost of carry on $5 for some period of time. So when they add up to 5, that means if you have one trading at say 270, for example, off of 5, the other one has to be trading at 230. If it's not, there's some sort of discrepancy that you have to account for. Could be
Right.
some sort of skew in there. It could be a hard to borrow. It could be a dividend maybe in there.
Dividend, yeah.
It could be any one of a number of things. But at the end of the day, they need to add up to 5, and there might be a price advantage on one over the other. But on a risk graph, they are synthetically identical to one another.
Yep. So if you pay 270, the most you could make would be 230. But if you sell for 230, the most you could lose is 270. Well, that's just two different ways of saying the same thing, which is
Right.
why it's wrong when people just bang on about the credit spread, credit spread, credit. It's the same thing.
Same exact thing. Pay
It's
270.
those two are there's just two different ways of saying the same thing.
Yeah. Same.
But anyway, this is why a lot of people think I want to sell the spread because I'm going to get positive gamma or I'm going to get negative gamma, and they don't understand where it's coming from.
Theta, right? I want to get paid.
Or I want positive theta. That's usually the bigger one, right?
I want to make theta. I want to make theta. I want to make theta. Let me sell them at 230.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the question is, which is positive and negative gamma? So we want you to think about that for a quick 5 or 10 seconds. Which of those spreads has positive or negative gamma? All right. Now, let's take a look at the risk graph. Here is the 100-105 vertical. We can see its cost of 270 down here. We get a bend at 100, one at 105. But notice that if the stock is down here somewhere at 95, we're operating over in this left tail. But if the stock is up at, let's say, 105 over here, we're operating towards this upper half. We've lined ourselves up at the point of maximum gain. On the other hand, we put ourselves at the point of maximum loss. All right, so that's going to turn out to be important. So if we look at this, the blue curve is the current curve. Same as the black curve. The black curve is just at expiration. The blue curve is today, let's say with 30 days to expiration. So now watch what happens. If you have the 100 105 spread with the stock at 95, you have positive gamma. That's why I made this line green, and we can see it because this blue line, not real easy to see there, you'll see it as time goes by, but it's a little bit like a smile. We are going to accelerate our deltas for the reasons that we saw, but if we're up in this side, do you see how it's starting to look like a frown? And we are going to decelerate our deltas. So watch what happens. Let's say 5 days later, now with 25 days to expiration, we're going to move from the blue to the orange. Yes, you can see vertical spreads move very slowly. But we're starting to see some more curvature over here on the left or on the right. 20 days to expiration, 15 days to expiration, 10, 5. Look at that gap now. Now you can definitely see this is looking more like a frown over here. That is negative gamma. We are increasing our deltas, but at a reduced rate. That's why it's curving downwards. Over the left, what's happening? We're increasing our deltas as well, but at an increasing rate. That's why it's sloping upwards. And it's simply because that bell curve is moving through stock prices.
Well, a lot of times we get the question in our Q&As, I have this vertical spread. Should I dump it or should I wait till expiration?
Yeah.
So that's what's going on here, right? I mean, if you're in the money, it's going to go up in value, but you're playing against the potential of it going out of the money.
Correct.
You have two different forces potentially going against each other here.
Right.
So it's like, well, if I wait, I'll get more money, but if I wait, the stock might go down. Remember what Bill said in the beginning: the stock moves, the strike prices do not. Right. So if the stock is moving away, creating that in the money spread to become out of the money, you're going to be losing. You're going to be losing money, and vice versa the other way. So that question of like, what should I do with my vertical spread, is not really so easy to answer. The real question behind that you're trying to ask is, what will the stock do? Which, of course, nobody knows.
So we can see over here a benefit that we get from starting here with the stock lined up at the short strike is that we don't need the stock to move. It's another way to understand negative gamma. But what's the downside? If it's a benefit, you have to pay more for it. It's going to cost you more, okay, as opposed to coming out here with the stock at 95 with that same spread.
Yeah, it's 270 versus 230.
Well, I mean, but if we took the debit spread for 270, but if that was with the stock at 100, but at 95, 100. It's going to be a lot less.
Yeah, the stock's a little lower now. Another way to kind of look at this, people, is, like what position are you long? Are you long the hundreds, or are you not long the hundreds? Are you short the 105s? So if you got the debit spread on, you're going to be long the hundreds. Stock's 95. You're closer to the 100, and that's
closer to the 100.
You're going to be long the gamma, right? That's another way to look at it.
Yeah, we said earlier that if you own an option, you have positive gamma. Well, if this is the debit spread, the call spread, where is the stock closest to? Towards the long one. It's another way, like Stu said, to understand you're in the positive gamma zone. But over here, we're lined up at the maximum gain, and that's where? The short strike.
That's where you're short.
The short strike has negative gamma. So that's also saying we don't need the stock to move. We have positive theta. And we can see all of these colored lines are doing what over time? They're moving up towards the black. All right, so they are going to appreciate over time. What's happening over here on the left? They're sinking. They're sinking towards the black. That's because we have negative theta. Now that doesn't make it bad. We got positive gamma. We're going to accelerate those deltas if we're right. It just makes it lower probability.
Now go back to that question that we posed in the very beginning. We're not going to answer it quite yet, but you can kind of see what's happening here. At some points on the stock price line, you're actually long gamma, and some points you're actually short gamma, right? Kind of depends on where you are.
That's right.
And that
Yep,
doesn't mean you go from one to the other overnight. I mean, you might,
you
but
might.
it's a very dynamic marketplace that changes all the time. And especially days like this, Q, like look at the Qs. Qs are down almost 2% today, a $9 move. You might have moved through strikes, and your long gamma might have gone to short gamma, and your short gamma might
Yeah,
have gone to
easily.
yeah.
Yep, it absolutely could. So that's just a very good visual of what's happening. But what I wanted to show is that this is that look at the red curve. That's the most exaggerated. That is what? That's the cumulative bell curve. And that's where that's coming from. It's just showing that as that stock continues to move further and further, that we're not going to add any more deltas. We're just going to run out of steam, and in which case both options go to parity and the spread is worth 5. So we can now see if we go day by day. Remember, this red curve is with 5 days. These were 5 day steps. There's 4 days, there's 3, there's 2, and there's 1. And we still have a pretty good gap here. So again, it's to show that these spreads move very slowly until you get right to expiration. This is also why we get this a lot in Q&A where people say, hey, the stock's at 105 with 30 days to go. How come I'm not at maximum gain? You're way down here.
It's so funny, Bill. Any way you try and spin this, it always comes to be the same
Yeah,
answer. Think about that call spread. Well, if the stock sinks, they're both zero, right? At the end, they're heading towards zero,
heading towards zero.
and you got nothing. You got no delta. You got no gamma. You have nothing. So whatever you paid for it, you lost. If you're short the put spread, it's heading towards 5.
That's
So
right.
whatever you sold it for is now higher, and you
Yep.
lost that same money that you would have paid for the other one. They are synthetically
They're
equivalent to
two
one
different
another.
ways of saying the same thing.
That credit is a liability.
Right.
It's
You owe the difference in
paid to
strikes.
handle a liability. The other one you can look at as an asset
Right.
that is sinking in value
Right. It can increase in value.
and
Correct.
can increase in value if it goes the other way as well, and the credit spread will decrease in value, which will make you money.
Yep. Yep. So anyway, these are some very good visuals of what's happening. So the main thing to understand is that if you are in the area of, let's say, the maximum loss, if you can visualize your current curves and they look like a smile, you are in the positive gamma zone. What does that tell you? It tells you that you absolutely, positively need the stock to move to make money. That doesn't make it bad. It just should be part of your outlook. It's what we call a speed component to it. You've got to get the stock has to get moving. And that's because we have positive gamma. However, if we're up in this zone where these curves are looking more like a frown turning downwards, they're still increasing, but at a decreasing rate. What happens here? We do not need the stock to move. And all things equal, that would be a benefit. So that means you're going to pay more for that debit spread or receive less for the credit spread.
Can actually just sit there and you're golden, and can
You're
actually
golden.
decrease somewhat over time while the decay
Possibly.
is
Yeah. Yeah. If the stock were up here,
happening,
yeah.
and you're catching those extrinsic value dollars coming your way. The delta's going up, and you have a little wiggle room to actually watch the stock go down as you're having bullish sentiment
Yep.
about it, and you're still good.
Yep. And that's why it's important to set a goal and say, well, what am I trying to do? Should I position myself in the positive gamma region or in the negative gamma region? And those are really important questions. And we find that traders completely ignore that. What do they like to look at? The risk reward ratio. Let me put it out here with the stock at 85 so I can pay 50 cents and maybe make 450, and they'll go, what a great risk reward ratio. Well,
Yeah,
that's called a losing deal. Yeah, it's a
on
great risk
on a
reward ratio, but
probability.
it's for a reason.
Yeah, on a probability basis.
Yeah,
Bet one to make 4. Bet 2 to make 8. They're lower probability bets. That's why they're priced at 2. And the
well, they're
private,
probably, exactly. And
why
up
can
here
you
you might be paying 350 to make a buck 50 or pay 4 to make 1. And
it's a
people
high,
say, oh, it's a horrible risk reward ratio. Well, that's not the whole story. You've
no
also got negative gamma, which is a benefit. You've got
working
positive
for it.
theta, all else equal is a benefit. And that's why those prices are showing up. So anyway, that's just kind of a good visual that we think it would really help people to understand this idea of positive and negative gamma. So the recap is to remember that if you see your current curve curving up like a smile, that's an area of positive gamma. If it is curving downwards like this, it is negative gamma. And that's true of all of your spreads and even of your long options. Now, if it's a long call, you're just going to see this half of the risk graph right there.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at butterflies, they can switch, right? So that's why a little bit of a trick question. It depends on where you are.
Yeah. So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. So there's another one just kind of cleaned up, and you can see that very clearly. This looks like a smile on the left-hand side. We're on that left-hand side of the bell curve. And you can imagine that green line moving through time or moving through these stock prices. We're just walking right up here. And
And
eventually you're going to hit the downslope of that bell curve and start increasing at a decreasing rate. And that is the negative gamma zone.
and here's a little tip on trying to understand what we've been talking about today and using the graphs to show you. To picture that moving graph like Bill showed you, 30 days, 20 days, 10 days, 5 days. Picture that in your head. Be able to picture what's happening as the stock is moving down and as the stock is moving through time, as the position is moving through time. See that. Actually see it in your mind's eye. And then check do the homework. Check yourself using the graphs and kind of see if you were in the game. But when you can see the future of that spread or that option, as you identify different time segments and as you identify different stock price movements, both alone and together, you're well on your way to understanding the things that we talked about today, the theory behind how options work.
Just give me an idea. One thing I think maybe we could do for the next one is do a continuation of this identical topic, but let's bring up a platform. I can bring up E-Trade. We could flip over to you for Thinkorswim and just show people, depending on where the stock is and how we construct the spread, whether we have positive or negative gamma. Let's see if we can figure it out in our head, put it on, and then see if it agrees with the platform.
Yeah,
I think that would be a
definitely do that, and actually show how as we move, we could simulate.
Of course, yeah, yep. You can show
we
how
could simulate moving through prices. Yeah, we can do all that for sure.
Very cool. So let's end with this, with our Chalk Talk thought-provoking question: is a debit spread positive or negative gamma? What about a credit spread? All right. So before you answer, you should always know a debit spread is identical to a credit spread. They're just two different ways of saying the same thing. In my example, do you want to pay $270 to make $230, or do you want to sell at $230 to lose $270? It's the same thing. There are two different ways of saying the same thing. So that should tell you that there is no difference between a debit or a credit spread. But now, once we dive even deeper, it depends on where the stock is. If the stock is closer to the long strike, whether it's a debit or a credit spread, you've got positive gamma. If it's closer to the short strike, whether it's a debit or a credit spread, you've got negative gamma. So, Stu, anything to add to that?
Again, just be able to see this. Be able to, don't rely so much on, oh my God, what was that formula? That's nonsense, right? Understand how these things work and you'll be way ahead of the game. You'll stop asking yourself questions like, what should I do? Should I get out of this spread or should I keep it? You'll focus on the idea that, it's what you're really asking is where the stock is going. And of course, nobody knows that. And you can then focus on the risk of the position that you currently have on and what it entails moving forward. That's the key. Right. What does it look like moving forward? I often get, oh, well, my cost basis is, I don't really care. It doesn't
It's got nothing to do with it. It's a sunk cost.
It's nothing to do with it. And that just tells me you're relying on some number to bail you out
Yeah,
if it goes the wrong way. You own it at $1 and it's trading at 4. Well, if it goes back to 3, it's okay because I paid. If it goes back to 1, it's okay because that's what I paid for it and I
that's what
didn't
I
make.
paid for it. No, it's not okay.
And that's pure garbage, right? In my mind, you just lost $3.
Right. So you should look at, in economics, we always call it the marginal decision. So yeah, I might have paid 270, might have paid 2 for it, buck. Doesn't matter what you paid for it. But let's say it's trading for 4 now. The question isn't what did I pay for it and how much can I make? The question is what will the change in this spread's value be tomorrow? Maybe go from 4 to 410 versus am I willing to hold it for one more day at the expense of potentially losing 4?
Or
That's
some
the
people.
question.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
What's it worth now? And is it worth holding for one more day and say, well, for how much of an incremental reward? And then when you get to there, if it's worth now 410, is it worth holding for another day, considering that I might lose 410 or at least a chunk of that? And that's really where the decisions lie. But this is going to help you a lot just by understanding where those positive and negative gamma zones are. So with that, I think that's probably a pretty good stopping point, and hopefully we'll be back on for next Thursday. But Stu, let's go ahead and put that on the calendar. We'll do a kind of an informal. Maybe we can get Scotty on.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit about Thinkorswim and E-Trade, and take a look at putting on some vertical spreads and identifying if they're positive or negative gamma. And I think that'll help traders a lot.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
Excellent. So with that, we hope that gave you some new insights into positive and negative gamma. And for all of the people in our Q&As, if you still have questions, bring them to us Tuesday, Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we'll see you next Thursday on Coach's Corner.